If you had asked me in 2017 how much a Steven Spielberg directed musical with a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes would have made in the box office, my goofy 15-year-old self would have been like, who the f are you? But then after some convincing, I would have guessed around $500 million, or at least breaking even. But in actuality, Steven Spielberg's West Side Story made a worldwide box office total of $76 million on a $300 million budget. And that isn't the only one. Let's talk about the new Hollywood box office flop. Getting people to come to the movies every year has become more and more difficult, but the pandemic sped up that gradual decline exponentially, because it not only forced people not to go for a year, but it kind of just made the average moviegoer forget about it. And although, to be fair, movies like West Side Story and Tenet were greatly impacted from the pandemic, movie theaters have been open for a while and big budget movies have been coming out non-stop, but they're still flopping like never before, seemingly for no reason. But the one thing the pandemic forever changed is this one devious, overarching term: marketing. Marketing. Originally, or at least up until like the mid 2010s, marketing for a film was fairly simple. You get some big names attached to your film, release a trailer 5 months before its release, a second one 3 months, a final trailer a month before, and then you release some hotspot commercials weeks leading up to the release. And then, hopefully, if your movie's good, it'll coast off of that word of mouth marketing and you'll make a ton of money. And worst case scenario, even if your movie performs bad in theaters, you have more or less its second release, which is that of the physical copy. A great example of this is the movie Tommy Boy, which did pretty well in the box office, like it broke even, but its physical release is still in the movie studio's top 10 ever selling movies, and this is a studio that released Indiana Jones. But today's movie marketing is almost completely different, and most people in these high positions of power don't know what to do. The three most surprising box office flops of 2021 were West Side Story, The Last Duel, and The Suicide Squad. The Last Duel honestly is a movie I haven't even seen, but has a stacked cast and has glowing reviews. But honestly, the reason I believe this movie flopped was that it was just a story that people weren't interested in seeing, with a cast that nobody really cared about anymore. Don't get me wrong, I love to see Matt Damon and Ben Affleck in a movie together, but the only actor that's like truly in like the public zeitgeist of beloved actors as of this moment was Adam Driver, and his like last big movie was The Rise of Skywalker. So, but West Side Story dials this up to a whole nother level. All 2021 movies suffer from the pandemic, that's an important note to make. However, not only is West Side Story a movie that theater kids would eat up, but it had Baby Driver himself, celebrity heartthrob Ansel Elgort, in the starring role. But then like halfway into filming, it was kind of exposed online that Ansel Elgort's kind of like a predator and low-key a racist too. And at that point, they simply did not have enough budget to recast and refilm his part. And they just kind of released the movie, and the movie's target audience is theater kids, and most theater kids aren't going to want to support that problematic actor. That doesn't even match up to the most disappointing bomb of 2021, that being The Suicide Squad. Yes, I think the biggest thing that was in the way of this movie's success was its predecessor, Suicide Squad. However, The Suicide Squad is honestly in my top 5 DC movies of all time. And although it's confusing because some people just refer to Suicide Squad as The Suicide Squad, word of mouth for this movie should have picked up steam and gotten it cash. But it didn't, and here's why I think it's the case. With social media nowadays, trends come and go quicker than ever. And if you want your movie to be a success, it needs to become a trend in one way or another. And I just don't think that movie ever really got there. The movie came out on August 6th of 2021, and it didn't do well on opening weekend, but word of mouth had DC executives hopeful that the movie would pick up steam on its second, third weekend. Except the following weekend had to go up against Free Guy, which somehow had more superhero cameos than the actual superhero movie. And with social media influencers literally in the movie, it was the only thing people were talking about online, and people almost entirely forgot about that other movie that came out a week before. Another important note, it's not new for a movie to get overshadowed by another one that came out the next weekend. It's a battle that's been going on in Hollywood literally since the beginning of movies. It's just The Suicide Squad is so much better. I'm sorry, but like, come on. Then we go to 2022. Honestly, I think this is the era of Hollywood executives panicking because they realized they really didn't know how to make a successful movie anymore. And so they used one of the things they thought worked and just stuffed every actor they could into their movies. And that gives us Amsterdam and Babylon. Both movies have huge, absurdly large casts with acclaimed directors at the helm, and they both lost so much money. I feel like a big reason as of why one of these failed is because Amsterdam was directed by David O. Russell, who the public has slowly been turning on because people are slowly realizing that he's kind of a garbage person. But I mean, like, Amsterdam had Taylor Swift. How wasn't this movie a success? But easily the biggest shock to me this year was Babylon. From the director of La La Land, starring Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, Spider-Man himself, Tobey Maguire. And you're telling
me that loses money?
A big part of why this movie failed was because the trailers were awfully elusive as to what the movie was about. And then the most damning thing to happen to this movie, nobody really talked about it. Even though an elephant unloads on the main character literally within the first 5 minutes, people who wanted to see it opening weekend saw it opening weekend and maybe talked about it once or twice on the internet, but that was it. And then the movie just kind of faded into obscurity. 2023. For this video, I have mostly been talking about flops at the box office, which makes sense because that's what this video is about. But I think it's really important to talk about this specific moment of 2023, Barbenheimer. With both movies making nearly $1 billion at the box office, it proves that audiences are more than willing to go out to their local movie theater. But where it gets tricky was the hype around this movie was almost 100% organic. Audience members started the whole Barbenheimer trend, and studios tried to cash in on this, with the next week trying to do like a Paw Patrol movie and Saw X collab, but it just wasn't the same, which brings me to Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, which that movie by no means should have been a flop. It had fantastic reviews, a solid opening weekend, a solid following weekend, but then before Barbenheimer, pictures of Tom Cruise and director Christopher McQuarrie holding up tickets for Barbie and Oppenheimer made its way onto the internet, and that move unknowingly caused the death of their film, which is a little bit dramatic, but you know what I mean. Instead of people wondering what movie they should watch, Tom Cruise gave them the go-ahead to not watch his movie and watch the other two, and that's kind of what everybody did. Now, it's important to note there are plenty other reasons as to why people saw Barbie and Oppenheimer over Mission Impossible, but I think it had a role. Honestly, a lot of what I'm talking about is speculation and theorizing, and that's all anybody can really do during this time. I don't have specific marketing statistics, but I say that because this next box office flop requires a lot of it. The Flash. The Flash took the title of not only the biggest box office flop of 2023, but one of the biggest box office flops ever. But on paper, it shouldn't have been. The film featured an iconic character's first ever live action solo outing, with none other than Michael Keaton returning as Batman. Dare I say it, a competent and original script. But the movie faced every marketing challenge in the book. Originally slated to come out March of 2018, by the time the movie came out 5 years later, it had changed release date 6 times. And by that point, everybody kind of forgot about it. However, the small percentage of people that didn't forget about it and were still excited to see the movie were discouraged even further to see it because the lead actor Ezra Miller caught themselves in a lot of hot water, committing several crimes such as breaking and entering. And on top of that, by the time the movie did come out, it looked awful and was obviously visibly rushed through production. And honestly, I think this is the greatest example of why these movies are flopping. It's not superhero fatigue, whether that be a thing or not. It's not bad reviews, it's the internet. It doesn't matter how good or well produced your film is. If the audience you're catering to doesn't care much about it online, your film's a goner. Superhero fans were so uninterested in this film after 5 years of delays, problematic leads, and bland run-of-the-mill effects that they forgot about this film almost as soon as it came out. That's why Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny failed. That's why Haunted Mansion failed. That's why The Marvels failed. And that one has to do with like a little sprinkle of misogyny too, but that's whatever. It should be interesting to see how films and studios eventually catch up to this new era of marketing, because it's no surprise that we have huge names like David Fincher and Guillermo del Toro running to Netflix, because even if a movie's a flop in the box office, its new second life is on streaming. Take a look at No Hard Feelings or Nobody, for example. Movies that had bad to lukewarm box office numbers, but stayed in the Netflix or Amazon top 10 for weeks on end. It's essentially a safety blanket, and if your movie premieres on one of those platforms, it's way more of a safe bet to get people to see it than, putting it in theaters. Alright, but what do you guys think about this new era of movie making and movie marketing? And more importantly, what movie did I not mention that has also suffered from this new era of movies? Alright, that's all for today. Follow for more. I do a lot of shorts, and I'm looking forward to doing more of these video essay type segments. Okay, that's all. Subscribe, please.